Okay, Rose, and today we're going to be talking about section 44 of Belonging Again. We're discussing the problem of character, the possible of absolute knowing, Nietzschean children, things of this nature, and character distinct from values. And we also discussed in the last section the Sacred and Profane by Murshid Elagia, whose name I struggle to say, on religious formation, how society seems to need to have a similar structure of given and releasance embodied in religion. And moving forward, we are now asking the question about meaning. In the book Making Sense of God, Timothy Keller discusses the difference between a created meaning and a discovered meaning. And I think this distinction might be helpful for broader conversations going on in the liminal web space, a lot of the conversations online. And Keller wants to, so he's speaking to a Christian audience, and he makes the point that subjective creative meanings do serve human life well. And he warns Christians not to tell their non-religious friends that their lives are meaningless, because that's a move that some Christians can make. And that's not, Keller doesn't think that meaning, you need to believe in God to have meaning in your life. The main thing that Keller wants to say is that created meaning is very fragile, while discovered meaning, which is grounded in a transcendent like a God, is much more robust. So for him, a created meaning is fragile and it's weak. It weakens quite quickly under too much thinking or adversity, when you encounter an inconvenience, whereas a discovered meaning can actually grow from suffering and sustained thought. And it's kind of a critical point he's making here. We've been talking about the possibility of community character and ethics, and we could also say that what the difference between created CCE and discovered CCE. And for Keller, it's not that you need God to have CCE. Indeed, the ethic against forbidding that we've described seems to me to be the foundation for a kind of community and character. It's just that it's fragile. When you encounter a situation where what you want to do comes in conflict with what you ought to do, it's very likely that the average person will go, well, this notion of what I ought to do is just subjective and based on, someone's own ideas, and therefore not follow it. So it's very, it's much less likely that a created meaning is going to compel action when it's difficult. And that's where, for him, you really need to put the emphasis on the discovered meaning. Now, of course, if you say, well, God doesn't exist, so there can't be a discovered meaning, well, that's, of course, the line of argument one can take. But as a sociological reality, this makes things quite difficult, because if a discovered CCE or transcendent ordering principle is not possible, and yet it would seem as if something like that is necessary for society to function, then this poses an issue, because what you would basically need is a created CCE or some of that nature, of which was not fragile and rather was anti-fragile. And how might that be possible? We've mentioned how religions can be psychotechnologies. And really a lot of the talk that we've been doing on religions and the concept of God and different things, one can view as a psychotechnology that societies seem to need to function. Likewise, obviously, if you don't believe in God, you believe that all transcendent values that supposedly were discovered were actually created, but they somehow functioned as not merely created. So as a psychotechnology, they were very, very different. Today, since givens have been destabilized, if we're going to replace them, we have to knowingly create them. And this is a new phase. Is it possible for us to do that? Is it possible? I don't doubt that a minority of people may, but can the majority? And this would be the equivalent of being a Nietzschean child, someone who creates a law for themselves that compels their action even when it costs them, even when it may kill them. They are still compelled by it. That would be a created transcendent order that practically was equivalent to a discovered order, because it had that much power over a person's actions. And the question is today, is it possible for the majority of people to do that? Or only a minority? Now, this again is the question of, can people be absolute knowers? And again, the question would be, can one live as if a God exists or a transcendent order exists, even if one does not? It's a very unique situation that we find ourselves in, trying to manage, and this would be the question of spreading absolute knowing. Please, as a note, I want to make very clear, I am not saying that character and CCE are always good, because it's very, if you were a German, you were charactered and following a transcendent order to join the Nazi party. And it was precisely the fact that that transcendent order felt discovered and objective and undeniable that was one of the reasons why you got the trouble of Nazi Germany as a quote-unquote mass. So we're not saying that discovered meanings are always better than created meanings, but we are saying that as a psychotechnology, they are different. And it would seem as if one needs to be able to create a meaning that is practically like a discovered meaning in order to restore what we've lost with the loss of the psychotechnology of religion and sociological givens in general. And considering that, we will have to continue to move forward. Now, of course, one of the advantages of a created meaning that practically functions like a discovered meaning is we might be able to leave it if it falls into Nazism or check and balance it, so it might be more active and less prone to fall into the banality of evil. But then again, maybe not. These are things we will have to consider, and at the end of the day, it might be an impossibility, but we will have to see. For more by OG Rose, please visit the playlist on YouTube, the list on Medium, and ogrose.com. And thank you so much for your time.